But let's get into something I think could start impacting us right away, and that's this vaccine passport issue, which is all over the news. And I think that by using the term passport, it's misleading. Passport, you think immediately international travel. Well, in the United States, we could say, what you need to have to come to the United States. An island in the Caribbean, if you want to take a Caribbean trip after you've been vaccinated, or if you haven't been vaccinated, could say what they require for you to come. That's not in the U.S. They get to make up their rules. They get to decide what their rules are in the U.K. if you're an American that wants to travel there internationally. So it's not that when we talk about a vaccine passport, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about what it will take to travel internationally again, and will there be some kind of international database. In fact, as of now, the Biden administration doesn't even want to take the heat on having a federal nationwide database. They want to put this passport idea, which is about going to a concert in your own state, or maybe in a state nearby, it's a couple hours away, or staying in a hotel, or getting on an airplane to travel domestically. And they want to leave it up to states and businesses to start making the rules. Now, I think it'll then be really up to states and localities. But how confusing does that become when you're in one state that may not require this, and you want to go to another state that does, so that your state almost is forced then to have to provide some kind of vaccine passport so that you could go even maybe cross state lines and be able to conduct business like getting gas, or checking into a hotel, or attending a conference, conducting business, going into a restaurant. That's what they mean by passport. They are not talking about international travel. That's something very different. What is required to go to another country, some countries list lots of requirements and shots you have to get and things you have to provide them to get the visa. That's up to that country. This is a domestic passport is what they're really talking about. And Harry, I think by kicking the bucket here to states and businesses to do this actually makes the whole thing even more complicated, more confusing, and potentially how it's done tramples on a lot of individual liberty rights in the Constitution.
Absolutely. So I think this proposal on its face is designed as another Trojan horse. But if we look at it carefully, it is a corporate authoritarian database which will then be linked to other corporations, to other businesses, and perhaps to foreign governments. So, for instance, I have traveled to Africa. I needed to take a typhoid shot or a cholera shot or yellow fever. Yeah. But all I needed was a card. I didn't need a digitized so-called permission slip to purchase gasoline in my neighborhood. And I think part of the problem is in the United States, we have such large corporations and they have such a large database, and they can voluntarily link this to the federal government. And so, and I'm not defending Edward Snowden, but he pointed out some of the problems that we have had in the United States. And I think ultimately we set ourselves up to be hacked by whom? The Chinese.
Right.
And then to the extent that they have that information and they can then link it to other healthcare information about us as individuals, this is very, very dangerous. And this means that the American people could fall prey to authoritarian control, not necessarily from government directly, but from corporate authoritarians.
Yeah, and they're being supported by the federal government. I mean, I think that this is an interesting question coming in. Shantae in Nevada on line 4 with some information out of Nevada. Shantae, welcome to Seculo. You're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So me and my husband were talking about all this last night, and we were kind of wondering, like, with the direction that all this stuff is going, what do you guys think about driver's license? Because if you now have to have, or some places are trying to make it where you have to have the vaccine to travel, which we will never take, what about being able to get your driver's license? I mean, if you can't go from state to state without a vaccine, what happens then?
Well, I mean, first of all, it would trample on your right to travel and interstate inside the United States, but a constitutional right. You have a right to move. You have a right to travel. You're not stuck in a state. That's part of your constitutional right. That if you want to go somewhere else to visit people, it's all part of the United States of America. It's why we have a United States of America. If you want to move to another state for a job, you have the right to do that. If it to better yourself, your family, put them in a better spot. You have these rights that are enshrined by the Constitution and Supreme Court precedent. The question then becomes, though, is can you go into the DMV if you don't have the vaccine certificate or at least a note from a doctor saying that you have conditions? Because there are people that literally cannot take the vaccine. They just can't. So I guess they would need some kind of doctor's note and have to keep wearing a mask or something. But the idea is if you can't even go into the DMV, then you can't get a license. You can't legally be driving a car. I mean, this poses a lot of problems, Wes.
Yeah, ramifications are really, really, unpredictable and extensive. And Jen Psaki, I'm sorry, I have never seen a press secretary in my lifetime, and I'm old, parse words the way she does. You have to listen so carefully to what she's saying, what she's not saying, and the nuances. Because when she says, which she did, that concerning this passport, vaccine passport, well, we will defer to companies, individual corporations, and to the states. This administration, the federal government, is in hyper mode of controlling companies and states. And so that is not very, very reassuring to me when they say that.
No, I mean, the shutdowns, the closures, that. This is Jen Psaki, Bite 14.
There will be no centralized universal federal vaccinations database and no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential.
Wow. But all that is that you won't have to have one specific credential because everybody gets kind of like different cards and different vaccines. But it goes on because she gets questioned about this vaccine passport issue. Take a listen again to the Bite.
We expect, as Andy Slavitt, I think, alluded to, that a determination or development of a vaccine passport or whatever you want to call it will be driven by the private sector. Ours will more be focused on guidelines that can be used as a basis.
Guidelines, so they're going to control it. Absolutely. I mean, Harry, that's there it is. We're going to tell you what you need to have to meet the federal standard.
So I think it is clear, and I think Wesley is onto it, that Jen Psaki believes in the creative use of language, meaning, of course, that she believes in duplicity. And I think it will be clearer, I should say, to the American people that the Biden administration is becoming the most duplicitous administration in U.S. history. And so we should take every single statement made by Jen Psaki and President Biden with huge grains of salt, because at the end of the day, they do not fundamentally believe in the rule of law. They don't fundamentally believe in the Constitution. Notice what she said. She said, we will provide guidance. That means they will provide control, but then when things go south, they will then blame it on those corporations which were guided by them.